we're going to continue part 2 of vertical motion model word problems, okay? And yesterday's, remember, we ended up having no initial vertical velocity. So really, it was just h equals negative 16 t squared plus s, your starting height. Remember that? And h, anybody remember what h is? H is, it's the height at any given time of that arc, right?
Yeah.
But when they ask you to find when the height is 0, boom, they're asking you to find the zeros, right? They're asking you to find the x-intercepts, right?
Yeah.
Make sense? All right, so today though, most of the problems on the homework are going to be like this, where a startled cat jumps off the ground. The starting height is what?
0.
0, right? Starting height is 0. So now our C is 0. Yesterday our V was 0. We had a C, but we didn't have a V. Now though, the S is 0. And we have, the cat has an initial vertical velocity, meaning he jumped up, right? 20 feet per second, right? And after how many seconds will it, the cat, land on the ground? So let's figure out what our equation is. We've got h equals negative 16t squared. This always stays as negative 16t squared. And then our initial vertical velocity is what? 20, right? So I'll put 20 what? T. I have to put that t after the 20. Guess.
Why is there a T in BT if there's no words in it? No, there's no words in it. That's not.
Because it's time. And at initial vertical velocity times the time. Basically, scientists are trying to mimic what happens in real life. And this equation is what they have found that actually helps to mimic it. Does that make sense?
So velocity is always feet / seconds?
Feet per second. Feet per second is what that means, right? Okay. Exactly. As long as you're using this formula, if you wanted to do meters per second, it would be something different. See what I mean? You might see h is equal to negative, I think it's 4.9 t squared plus vt plus s. That would be meters per second, right? But this is feet per second. So now they're asking, this is the question, after how many seconds will it land on the ground? Will h, guys, will h be 0? After how many seconds will h be 0? Does that make sense? That's what that means when it says when it will land on the ground. So this is what you're doing. Suddenly you have, let me think for a second. Yeah. So you have 0 is equal to negative 16 t squared plus 20t. Now notice I have no c, right? I have t's in both my terms, right? That's the important part. I need to factor out the t. I can do the greatest common factor if I want. You know, maybe 4, I could do 4 or negative 4 or something like that if I wanted to. But the only thing I have to factor out is the t. So watch this. I'm going to just put it like this. I'm going to put my 0 on that side. Is that okay? Yeah. Totally legal, right? So now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to factor out a t. And that gives me negative 16t plus 20. Do you agree with me?
Yeah.
Equals 0. So now, if this times this equals 0, then either this equals 0 or this equals 0, right? Right? So either t equals 0 or negative 16t plus 20 equals 0. Yes? You see how it's pretty easy, right? And now you just have to solve for t, right? You could subtract 20, right? You have negative 16t equals negative 20. Now divide by negative 16, right? And then you got t is equal to, did I put my calculators in? 20 divided by 16. 20 divided by 16 equals 1.25. 1.25 seconds, right? And now notice we have two possibilities. We have time is equal to 0 or time is equal to 1.25 seconds. Which one has to be the right answer?
1.25.
Why?
Because,
At time is 0, he hasn't jumped yet,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Once he jumped, then the clock started, right?
Okay.
So we're being asked when he landed back on the ground, right? And that makes sense, though, that at time 0, he was still on the ground. See what I'm saying? Makes sense.
So you just write,
So, yes, so you would say in, after how many seconds? I would say after 1.25 seconds. And that would be my answer. Does that make sense? Pretty straightforward. So most of these on this homework are this, where you have something negative 16 t squared plus something t, okay? And it's always a plus something t, unless none of these I'm throwing an object down, I'm throwing an object up. That's going to be a positive initial vertical velocity. If I was throwing something down, if I was on a cliff and I was throwing something down as hard as I could, that would be a negative vertical velocity, okay? Initial vertical velocity. But I'm not doing those to you. I'm not doing this. But there are the last two problems on the homework are ones where there are actually everything, okay? There is an initial vertical velocity and there's a starting height. And so I'm going to do one of them right now so that we can just practice it and see how that
write which
works.
one it is.
Hopefully. So I'm going to write this, I'm going to write the word problem. If you guys could write it while I'm writing it, that would be a lot easier on the video. Okay? So here we go, number 6. This is number 6 on the homework. A cliff diver jumps from a ledge 96 feet above the ocean. From a ledge 96 feet above the ocean. I used to do that. Maybe not 96.
Wait, you should be a cliff diver?
With an initial upward velocity, with an initial upward, usually it would say vertical, but I'm putting upward velocity of 16 feet per second. Oh, I hope this works. Wait, I was thinking it was said something else. 16, let me think about this for a second. 16, 6, 2, 3. That'll work. Okay, 16 feet per second, period. How long will it take the diver to enter the water? Or another way to say it is, how long was the diver in the air, right? That's another way to ask it, right? As soon as he jumps off the ledge, going upwards, right? He's in the air. And when he lands in the water, he's no longer in the air, right? So in other words, when he hits ground 0, right? When h is 0 again. We're being asked to find the zeros. Okay, so what's my equation? H equals what? Negative 16t squared, right? Plus my initial vertical velocity, what's that? Plus 16, what? T, right? All right? Plus what? My starting height?
96 feet.
Plus 96. Everybody see how easy that is? Setting up the equation is easy. All right, so now they're asking this. How long was the diver in the air? In other words, he's up here, right? And he jumps off, beautiful dive, boom. They're asking all this time, this is my time. So all this time until he lands in the water, I want to know how long that time is. In other words, find the zeros. Find the x-intercepts, find the zeros, right? So, but now this looks like a confusing problem, doesn't it? So first of all, this is what you do. We're asking to make it 0. So I'm going to actually do it this way. I'm going to put equals 0 over here, right? And now I'm going to rewrite negative 16 t squared plus 16t plus 96 equals 0. When something equals 0, I can divide, somebody's humming. I could divide everything by 16. Don't you agree with me? I would like to try to get this number, if possible, to be a 1 in front of the t. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm going to divide everything by negative 16. Okay, I have to even divide the 0 by negative 16. You with me? Now suddenly, well that becomes just t squared. You agree with me?
Yeah.
And then this becomes minus 1t, right? Minus 1t. And then this becomes, I think, 6 times, 6. That goes into that minus 6 times, you with me? Equals 0. Is it okay to have 0 in the numerator? Yes. But it's not okay to have 0 underneath, under the line. But so that's totally fine. It's just going to be 0. Now we have greatly simplified this mess just by dividing by negative 16, right?
Wait,
Now,
can't that just be minus t? Does that have to be negative 1t?
I don't have to have the negative 1t. I could just minus t, right? That's fine, right? Now the question is that a simple quadratic trinomial that you guys know how to factor? Factors of negative 6 that add to 1? Let's just try it. Let's try it. If I put a t here and I put a t here, factors of negative 6, what would they be? That add to negative 1. How can I get negative 6? Factors of negative 6 that add to negative 3 and 2. Everybody agrees that? T minus 3 and t plus 2, right? Let's just double check. Negative 3t plus 2t is negative 1t. Yes! So this works, right? Caleb,
Yeah.
makes sense? Yep. Now, what do I do now?
Well,
If a times b equals 0, then either a equals 0 or b equals 0. I write two equations, right? Yeah? So either t minus 3 equals 0 or t plus 2 equals 0. Whoops, get rid of that. And then I'm going to add 3, t is equal to 3, subtract 2, t is equal to negative 2. So I have two answers. Which one does it have to be? 3, right? And now this was a question that I think it was Isabella yesterday was asking the question, isn't the parabola continuing? Yes, it is at negative 2. See what I'm saying?
yeah.
You just figured that out, but it's not very useful in this case. This is the only one that's useful. That is at 3 seconds. So how long was the diver in the air? For 3 seconds. And that's my answer. Pretty straightforward. Does that make sense? Now it gets tricky when this doesn't divide evenly. You follow me? If that doesn't divide evenly, then you have to go and use a different approach, right? Because I have been, at this point in time, I have been really nice to you guys. I've been giving you things that are factorable, right? So that you can practice your factoring. But believe it or not, in real life, a lot of stuff is not factorable. And so there has to be another way. And eventually, next week, we'll probably be looking at ways to do it when it's not factorable. Okay? So that's basically it.
Are we gonna
So-
have math homework when we're closer to it?
Oh, what a great
Why would you
idea.
do that?
Never
No,
thought of that
like,
before.
No.
That's a great idea. I've never can you guys thank Raven for this brilliant idea?
Thank you, Raven.